calls open to account.
Okay, everyone, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you for coming here today when we should all be sat in a park or something. But I appreciate you coming for this meeting of the Climate, Energy, Environment Committee. I'm sitting in for Councillor Scullion, who's currently on leave, and hopefully we'll be back in this chair fitting well next time round. Just very briefly, do we have any apologies for absence?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Jane Scullion, Councillor Jenny Kent, Jane Atkinson, Richard Goodfellow, Greg Dodd, Ian Holmes and Jim Cardwell.
Okay, thank you very much. Just item number 2, which is declaration of disposable pecuniary interests, and just to ask members to highlight any declarations of interest either now or as and when they come up, and that might be if your organisation is involved in supporting funding or, you know, the drill anyway. Item number 3 is exempt information, possible exclusion of the press and public, and I understand there are no items on the agenda. Should we very quickly just go around the room? I can see there's probably a couple of faces here who aren't normally here. My name's Councillor Scott Patient. I'm Deputy Leader of Collardale Council, and I'm occupying the chair on this occasion. We're moving in that direction.
Alison Gillespie, Head of Place and Environment Policy at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Adam Hunt, Committee Support.
John Clark, I'm a private sector representative and I work for Cummins.
Hi everyone, my name's Adam Ashman, I work for Yorkshire Water and I'm an advisory representative.
Hello, I'm Martin Broadest, I work for Connect Housing. I'm here on behalf of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, which is the group of major housing associations and local authority housing providers working across West Yorkshire.
Hello everyone, I'm Jenny Cook. I'm the West Yorkshire Flood Risk Manager but representative from the Environment Agency where I can help.
Hello everyone, I'm Gideon Richards. I'm a private sector member. I have a consultancy company in sustainability called Consulting with Purpose Limited.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Brooke. I'm a Programme Development Lead working on the Home Energy West Yorkshire programme at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Hi everyone, I'm Femi. I'm one of the Programme Development Lead at the Net Zero and Energy team here at the Combined Authority.
Hi, I'm Rosanna Brett Davis. I'm a Policy Manager in Transport Decarbonisation at the Combined Authority.
Hi, I'm Jo Barham. I'm a Policy Manager in the Inclusive Economy Skills and Culture Director of the Combined Authority.
Hi, I'm Guy Rodriguez, part of Research and Intelligence, Economic Analysis.
Hi, Peter Glover, also from the research team at the Combined Authority.
I'm Councillor Barry Anderson from Leeds. I'm the Scrutiny Chair for WICA.
Hi everybody, I'm Councillor Katie Dye, also from Leeds, and I chair our Climate Emergency Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Sarah Ferrabay. I'm the portfolio holder for Health, People and Places from Bradford Council.
Afternoon everyone, Councillor Jack Hemingway. I'm Deputy Leader of Wakefield Council.
And hi everyone, so listen to Director of Policing, Place and Environment at the Combined Authority.
Okay, thank you, and you're all very welcome and clearly seasoned pros in terms of microphone etiquette, so full marks to you all on that one. Okay, moving on to item number 4, which is the meeting minutes of the meeting held back on the 13th of February 2024, which was a very different place, I think, which we'll touch on later. So can I move to you, Liz, to speak on it?
Thank you. Just wanted to pick up some of the actions from the last meeting before we approve the minutes. So the few things to mention which are in train. So you asked us for a site visit around the Better Homes Hub, now renamed Home Energy West Yorkshire, as you'll have seen from the papers. That's to come, so we haven't done that yet because I think we thought it's about the appropriate time for you to actually see something on site. So we haven't lost track of that. It's just on the action list. You also asked for a report about the skills around the green jobs for Home Energy West Yorkshire. A report is being produced and we'll share that when it's ready. You also asked for some information about the publicity around home energy, which we sent an email about. So hopefully you'll have seen that, and hopefully you'll also have seen that now the publicity has started around some of the products, which we'll pick up in Sophie's paper later. And within that email, we also talked to you about the solar for schools and gave you a bit more information on the decisions around that. So hopefully that answered your questions. We talked about green skills, and you asked for a paper that's on the agenda at item 10. And you also asked for information about the Strategic Climate and Environment Partnership, that's at item 13. Also in relation to the skills audit that you completed a few months ago, where we asked you the types of training that you might want to have. At the end of this meeting, when the formal meeting's over, there is a session on the assurance framework and how we make decisions. So we've made hopefully time allows within the timing of this meeting to have the training at the end of this session on that. So hopefully that addresses all the actions in the paper, and hopefully the minutes were accurate.
Thank you, Liz. And I don't know if anyone's got any other points, but hopefully you can see from the tracker there that most of those are being picked up elsewhere. Just with regards to the workshop at the end, if I could compel members, and we all do like to have ourselves heard, but try and be brief so we can maximise that sort of offline session, make it work well. But yeah, still obviously wanting room for discussion. So anything from anyone on those? No? Okay, perfect. So number 5 is the chair's update. So obviously fundamental change from last time is the results of the general election. Don't worry, I'm not going to get too hand-wavy political about things, but clearly there are a few things which might affect and change some of the work that we're going to do here and national, obviously in terms of Great British Energy, some of the work happening around our waterways and tertiary rivers and spaces by Steve Reed and company are probably going to be something to watch out for and keep an eye on. And we know about the commitment to net zero is something that's going to continue over from the last government, but perhaps hopefully with a bit more renewed vigour. I guess we know as well, we've heard some of the initial announcements around devolution and deeper devolution and some of the trailblazer packages, and we'll know Tracy Braben, our mayor here, is the chair of the Metro Mayors in the UK, which I think is a great place for us to be in terms of affecting that agenda broadly beyond West Yorkshire. But I think what that looks like, yet we still don't have full clarity on, and we need to make sure as a climate group that we're clear about what we want for that. And it's good that we have, I think, some of the structural architecture in place in terms of our plans and the net zero plan and the refresh of the environment plan as well coming down the line to make sure that we're able to do that. Obviously our 2038 target is significantly more ambitious with the current 2050 target as well, and that's something we shouldn't forget. But I don't know if there's sort of anything more on the devolution bit and the stuff that might happen at West Yorkshire, Liz, that you want to pick up on.
Thanks. So the Mayor is having a series of meetings with ministers, as you'd expect. I think as we sit here now, there's conversations and announcements being made about planning. So I think across all of the agendas, most of them do relate in some way back to what we want to do around climate and sustainability. So housing, the planning that we've already seen. So it's helpful to have, as you say, the Mayor involved in those conversations. And we'll report back to the committee as and when we know what further role the Combined Authority and local authorities will have from government.
Yeah, and obviously we've met as a combined authority as well since then, back on the 25th of July, and some of them, I guess, around what the broad outlines are around our key offer, some of the capital portfolio and how that works. So a lot of lovely climate-based capital projects being passed, including some lovely ones for Wakefield, but not exclusively, so which is good. And also some thinking around the assurance framework and some of the approvals on some of those changes as well. I think we're going to see what those implications look like, track out across our committee, transport, homes and economy, and lots of moving parts. As Liz said, there's a planning and housing MHCLG briefing later today based on some of the things that are passing through the comments today as well, to keep our eye out, that are all going to play into what we think. So I don't know if anyone's got any brief comments to make on that kind of chair's report, or should we move on? Okay, stunned silence, which we like. Moving on to item 6 then, which is around the governance arrangements, just to let us know what some of the changes have been proposed. So Liz, can I move to you on that?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual governance paper that, for those of you that have been with the committee a while now, will recognise, because we've had the Combined Authority AGM in June. It's pretty much similar to previous in terms of what we're looking for the terms of reference for this group. So hopefully that is familiar to you and you are accepting of the terms of reference for what this committee is trying to do. So fairly straightforward, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, and obviously members of the committee might be happy to know and to verify the scheduling of some of the informal meetings. So although there are less of the formal ones scheduled where we've got cameras in our faces, quite a lot of opportunity for us to do some deep dives offline in terms of the work that we need to do. But happy to take any questions on that from the floor. No? Wow, you are a quite a lot. It's the heat affecting us clearly. Okay, fine. Moving on, please bear with me for a moment while I manage my papers. I think item number 7 is Peter and around the monitoring indicators. So is it okay if I ask you to introduce that item, Peter?
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this paper is primarily for information and to inform the committee's discussions around key themes within its remit. And the background is that we update the committee on the headline monitoring indicators as new data becomes available. So our main focus today will be on the latest emissions data for West Yorkshire, plus a brief overview of registrations data for low emission vehicles. And that latter data set has been highlighted a number of times by the committee as being of interest. So that's why we featured it. I'm going to provide a brief introduction and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Guy to give more detail, particularly around the emissions data, and we have a few slides. In terms of the headline results, and focusing on emissions first of all, the official statistics for the 2022 emissions at local level published at the end of June, and the analysis is set out in the paper. So from page 21 onwards, and there's an appendix from page 29 onwards. And just to clarify, the emissions data we're talking about and reporting on relate to carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So that's what we're referring to when we talk about greenhouse gases in this context. But fluorinated gases are not included in the local emissions data. And the measure that we're using is CO2 equivalent units, within which each of the gases is weighted by its global warming potential relative to carbon dioxide. So just clarifying those points. In 2022, there were total greenhouse gas emissions of nearly 10,500 kilotons CO2 equivalent in West Yorkshire. And the key message is that, as expected, overall greenhouse gas emissions fell in 2022, and they more than offset the increase that we saw in 2021. So emissions fell by 7.4% compared with the previous year, and were 3.5% lower than in 2020, which was the previous lowest point. In comparison with 2019, they were 13.9% lower, so 13.9% lower than pre-pandemic. And we've seen a faster rate of reduction than the UK average year on year, and also over the period from 2019 to 2022. On page 34, in page 34 of your pack, there's a chart that plots West Yorkshire emissions trend against the existing carbon emissions reductions pathways, and I presented that in the slide here. Just to clarify, the pathways in the chart are those defined in 2021 in the sort of current study. They're not the forthcoming replacement pathways which are currently under development. So the reduction in 2022 returned emissions to somewhere between the 3 reduction pathways and close to the maximum ambition scenario in the 2021 CERT report. As we note in the paper, if that reduction that we've seen in 2022 is partly due to the energy price shock that hit in 2022, then we might expect some of the effect to wane as prices normalise, assuming that they do continue to remain at normal levels. But I think in terms of messaging, it's important not to allow the emissions reduction we've seen for a single year to distract from the continuing challenge of achieving net zero by 2038. And now I'm going to hand over to Guy to provide some more detail.
So thank you, Peter. So I'll give some more details on the carbon emission related data that we have in the paper. So on a per capita basis, we can see that carbon emissions perform relatively in line with what my colleague Peter described. So there was a decline that offsets the 2021 increase. We also see that carbon emissions fell stronger in West Yorkshire than the national average, both when you compare with the previous year or when we compare back to 2020. Our carbon emissions on total are lower, slightly lower than the ones at the UK average. When we look at the sources and the reasons why our emissions are lower than the national average, it is mostly about agriculture and waste, as you can see in this figure. The remaining ones, the broad groups, so domestic emissions, public sector, transport, are more or less in line. On the district level, out of the 5 districts, all of them except Wakefield has lower emissions than the national average, and we've seen declines per capita in all of them. Wakefield, the one with higher emissions, was the one with the smallest decline, but still 6%, minus 6% on a year-to-year basis. So when we look at the broad sectors over time to understand the performance and the reductions, and which give us a little bit more information as well to understand the carbon reduction pathways, we see that in 2022, domestic and public sector emissions were the one that fell the most. And because those are the ones that fell the most, and we know there was a price shock, as Peter said, and weather conditions were not that bad in 2022. It may be one of the reasons why we've seen such decline. And transport had a very strong decline in 2020, as expected with the pandemic, but since then has been very stable, which highlights the challenges of decarbonizing transport in the years ahead. Next slide, please. As I said before, our emissions per capita are below the national average, but when we do carbon emissions intensity, like how much it costs our GVA to be produced on carbon equivalent units, we are slightly above the national average, but converging. And we have our housing stock and industrial structure is part of the reason why our carbon intensity is higher. I think that's all on transport. So I have some information on registered vehicles by fuel type. So we have aggregated hybrid and electric vehicles, all combined to be easier to read. And in 2023, registrations in West Yorkshire of new vehicles were around half them within those classifications. So there's the variability between hybrid and electric, and it is above the UK average of 41%. When we look at the district level, we do see a lot of differences between the districts. With Leeds being much higher than 50% and growing, while Wakefield on the other end below 30% and declining. This has a lot to do with the composition of the vehicles in each area. So we know that nationally and in West Yorkshire, light goods vehicles are less likely to be either hybrid or electric, and they are outweighed in Wakefield. So when we compare just cars, the picture between local authorities looks much similar. And one of the reasons why Leeds perform so high has to do with commercial cars. So the share of commercial cars that are hybrid or electric is much larger than the ones bought for personal purposes. And when we control for cars that are private cars all districts perform more or less in line with each other and very close to the national average as well. So we should take into consideration these differences, but also take into account that they are not exactly comparing the same thing as the car fleet change from one place to the other. I think that's all. Thank you.
Okay, that's really helpful, and some, I guess, mixed messaging in different places there, depending on sort of what you're looking at. Interesting, the bits about agriculture and stuff as well, like some bits to drill into there. And I think the stuff on EVs maybe be helpful to pick outside to see what the difference between hybrid and full EV adoption is within there. And saying Calderdale's an early adopter, I'll bet my bottom dollar that's Hebden Bridge. Like, absolutely, bet my bottom dollar. But is there anyone else on here that wants to speak? Gideon, I think you had your hand up, then Adam, then Jack. That's very chivalrous. Adam, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, just looking at the information pack, so really good data to see. What I can't get is a sense of the projected impact of all of the initiatives that we talk about. So is there a forecast from each of the initiatives that we'll talk about today and that we've talked about over previous meetings, and how do they contribute to our decarbonisation pathway, whether it's a domestic or industrial? I'm just interested to get a sense of where we forecast will be on that journey.
Yeah, Liz?
Thanks. So you did right in talking about the carbon pathway work, and one of the workshops that Councillor Patient mentioned that we'd like to have with you in kind of early autumn is to go through that work, because so we have been looking at what assumptions would need to happen to reach that 2038 and what the forecasts basically are therefore. So if you can kind of wait until that workshop, we'll be bringing forward those assumptions. So unless the team wants to add anything further, because I know they're involved, that's kind of where we're up to with the work. But yeah, very much wanting to understand the kind of, this is fine, this is a look back, but what's the look forward, completely understand.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that one and give that a bit of time. But we're all here because we want to see action, aren't we? Gideon.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just wanted for us to think about the transition to electric vehicles and the use of home electricity for it. Right? And so what we could see is a bigger rise in domestic energy and a small rise in transport from the car side of it in particular. And I'm curious to know, and I think it's important that we understand what those differences are going to be going forward, because most people, the majority, can actually charge at home. It's cheaper to charge at home. It's also on off-peak times typically. And if we can understand some of those things, it would be very helpful in terms of projections and what we think we should be doing. And then the other part to that, which is on home energy, is heat pumps and things like that, and how that all is going to ramp up. And I think that would be useful to understand as well.
Okay, thanks, Gideon. Maybe collect these at the end. Jack?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on a few of the Wakefield specific points. Obviously, on a few of the metrics, it looks like Wakefield is lagging behind a bit of West Yorkshire. And just in terms of the emissions per capita, obviously, we do have certain areas of heavy industry still in the Wakefield district which present unique challenges. But I just want to say as well that we are working very well and very closely with those industries. They are fully on board with needing to be more sustainable and green. So some good work is taking place there. Obviously, it will take some time to turn that ship around. But just in terms of the EV figures and charges, obviously Wakefield's doing quite well with charges, but I'm concerned to see the adoption and demand for EV vehicles dropping off. So really just wondering, and an appeal to the Combined Authority, if we can do a bit of a deep dive around that and see if there's anything more that we as an authority or the Combined Authority can be doing to support the market and ensure that people are looking, and it's easy for people to look at switching to EV in the Wakefield district. Thanks.
Well, a few more hands going up there. Martin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, kind of similar point on what Jack just said, really. It seems to me that if we're counting here locally, locally grown emissions, if you like, we could be in a perverse situation where a heavy industry across the border in Barnsley, for example, employs lots of people from Wakefield district, but actually we don't, and the benefits of whatever that happens across the border benefit West Yorkshire, but all the emissions are counted in South Yorkshire. Similarly, you know, I'm guessing none of this picks up, you know, offshoring, manufacturing and other things in other countries, which is going to be an increasing proportion of our collective emissions, real emissions. As our own homegrown emissions reduce, the proportion of imported emissions is only going to increase. So I think, whilst yes, we want to celebrate the successes, and we also need to bear in mind that you know, emissions don't know no boundaries, do they?
And let's resist the temptation to self-flagellate too much. We've all got our crosses to bear on some of these metrics. You know, Kirklees with its access to green spaces, us with our energy efficiency in Calderdale. You know, hopefully this is an idea to gap analyse where we can pick up some of that, you know, some of that thinking and do the necessary work to try and fill those gaps. Gideon.
Yeah, just maybe for Jack's benefit, the whole of the industry has gone down in terms of EV take up at the moment, and we're looking at that. So it's not just Wakefield. The whole of the UK is, and globally, is actually going down a bit. So that's that one. Maybe though, in terms of what Martin has said, we need to start thinking about Scope 1, Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions in a more detailed way, and that way we'll get to understand them a bit better. And also, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment on environmental social governance, and that is, with the disclosure that are happening with that, you know, that is all three scopes, and it is also looking at the whole supply chain and the value chain. So maybe there's something we could do to support and help organisations look at that across the piece then, and that maybe will save from offshoring it, or you know, maybe we do need to get everyone out, move all the businesses out and just have the people here. No, I don't mean that.
Steady on. Kind of like a trifecta of voices, though, coming up with perhaps an interesting agenda item for an offline session at some point as we think towards that. I'm going to bring John in, and then I'm going to wrap this item up with officers.
Yeah, just a quick question really on the data on EV. Is the data based on where the vehicle was first registered in a particular area, or where it's currently housed? I asked that question based on my own experience of my electric car was registered in Newcastle. It's not registered in any of these regions, but obviously I use it I live in Leeds and work in Kirklees, so it'd be useful to maybe just clarify how the data is collected, because it might mean that actually the number of electric VVs in Wakefield is not as low as reported.
Okay, that got everyone all excited. Well done, John. Okay, over to Peter and Guy to pick those up and wrap up, please.
Yeah, so in terms of the impact on domestic energy of charging EVs, that's something we can look into, see if there are any studies that have been done on that. In terms of Wakefield and the sort of high per capita emissions, I mean, an important caveat is that not all of the emissions that are included in that ratio are sort of directly related to the population. So as you mentioned, the heavy industry is the defining factor for Wakefield, along with a number of high emission local authorities. In terms of, and that also applies to the point about the territorial emissions, so that this is a limitation of looking at emissions data at a local level. In terms of the offshoring point, so that's correct. Goods that are produced in West Yorkshire and then exported will be included in the figures because they're produced on an end user basis, but imported goods would not be captured. The only element that isn't on an end user basis is the sort of original energy generation, which is distributed across local authorities sort of proportionately to how it's used. In terms of the scope 2 and 3 aspect, I think SERP is looking at that, so I won't comment on that further. And then in terms of the data, whether on the vehicle registrations, I think that's where they're first registered. Yeah, so you're right, there could be issues there in terms of if they're then shipped down to another dealership or something, it could give, you would, I don't know whether the different flows would offset each other or not, but
sometimes you don't get a choice of where it's registered.
Yeah.
That's also
Okay, I can see Rosanna there eagerly wanting to
no,
add.
it's a known national issue. There's a fleet registrations and lease vehicles are registered outside of where they're used. It's something they're trying to overcome with the data sources, but they're not there yet. So we're working that with other partners to try and overcome those issues.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you. I think we've been asked to note this, but thank you so much to officers for working this up. It's really helpful and hopefully a bit of food for thought there in terms of developing some of the items. But appreciate your work. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 8, which is Alison, who's going to be talking to us about the programme priorities.
I think we're sharing a microphone, but yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the first Climate Committee of the year, so following the Combined Authority AGM in June. So this paper really is just to sort of set the priorities for the year ahead and to give you an overview of the programme of activity which the committee is going to be leading and steering on, and give you the opportunity to comment on that. So we've already mentioned we've moved to a frequency of 3 formal public committees across the year, but we are also proposing a number of private informal committees, and we have the option to add those into the programme as we move forward. And those will just allow us to have a deeper dive into some of the key topics and where there's some kind of early policy and programme development activity that we'd like you to be able to influence. So the paper is pretty high level. It talks about the core areas of activity for the committee. Those are on page 56 in the pack. So those are the carbon pathways and climate and environment plan work, which we've already mentioned today, residential retrofit, nature recovery, energy, climate resilience and flood risk management, private sector partnerships, transport decarbonisation, which is we have shared oversight of that with the Transport Committee, and then skills and business support also shared with the Business Economy and Innovation Committee. So those are the kind of headline topics. The report also sets out kind of proposed timings of meetings and the topics that will come forward across the sequence in the year. And then we're proposing that there's only one private session listed there at the moment, and that we're hoping to time for October, and that one will be a 2-part agenda focused on the local nature recovery strategy and the carbon pathways evidence and scope of the refreshed climate plan. But the other topics you should, they're listed across the meetings, so you'll see some progression between the public meetings and be able to influence that activity. So there's a set of slides appended. I'm not going to talk you through those. There are officers around the table that lead on some of the areas of activity that those cover, so if you have questions on those, please do ask. And then also please do flag if you think there are topics missing or there are areas of expertise that you would like to bring something additional on. But then I was just going to say 2 things on the specifics. So on the carbon pathways work, the timing of the public committees didn't allow enough opportunity for you to steer that, because we weren't ready to bring you the kind of pathways work to this meeting. So that's why we've scheduled the private session to allow you to have a look at that, and then we'll bring it again to the November session as well. So just to note that that's why that's proposed. And then on residential retrofit, just also to note that Jess McNeil's been appointed in a new role as Head of Service for our newly named Home Energy West Yorkshire activity. And so that's great that Jess will now be able to drive forward that work at pace and takes on that team. And we've sequenced an update on residential retrofit in every session, because we're expecting that there will be significant progress across this year, and Jess will be able to attend the next meeting, but also Sophie's going to cover an update today later on the agenda. So that's all I was going to say. I'll stop there, but happy to take any questions on the topics as listed.
Okay, thank you, Alison, for that. Our officers have noticed a bit of duplication in some of the meetings, but maybe that's because there's a sequencing around reporting on various different aspects of it. I'm seeing nods.
Yeah, so that's right. So we did have some more detail in there originally, which sort of gave you some indication of what you would see at each meeting. So, for example, in the example of residential retrofit, the next session we will talk to you about the one-stop shop and the details of that. But then by the March committee, we should be we should have procured and be in partnership with somebody to deliver that service. So hopefully we'll be able to bring the same topic, but you'll see it 3 months on, or however long the gap is between committees, and there'll be something else to share.
Perfect, thank you. And maybe we need to think about how we want to schedule more informal meetings as well, and how we want to theme those. I know there's a desire in the group and members and other people to have quite clear parameters about what we're discussing in that, and we really welcome that and thank officers for putting those schedules in. For me, I wonder if one of them is around what our influencing ask is towards national government. That feels like a particularly sort of pressing area. I'm trying to resist the urge to transpose all of our Calderdale stuff onto a wider thing, but hopefully that's something we could all sort of get together on. And anyone else in the room have anything on the asks there? Gideon.
Yeah, two things. One, please, for the private session, if we could maybe avoid the first week and a half of October, I'd be really appreciative, and I would like to go to the meetings. The other one is that I still think we need to think about how we engage with other scrutiny committees and things like that. I said it at the last meeting, but we're so cross-cutting with everything. It really is important that we, if we can, we get sight of what's going on at an early stage, so we can actually help and support and advise. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good point. Jenny?
Yeah, Alison, just an offer as well around, and I note the flood programme is in November, so if there's anything that we can do to work together that will be helpful for the committee to be aware of in terms of the agency's flood programme, and also the work that the RMAs are doing as a whole. There might be some kind of joint up messages that would be helpful to prepare for that. So let me know how I can help.
That's really good. I'm trying to remember my friend Roisin, who used to come to our meetings, saying try and avoid scheduling meetings during the school holidays as well. As someone with young children, I know it's not always possible, and there's a thing about aligning this with full CA meetings and all of our other various ones as well. But anyone else in the room? Yes, Martin.
Are we going on to cover the slide deck next?
I was going to go through the slide deck.
Okay, well that's fine. I just got a couple of suggestions in terms of things that I didn't see coming out of the programme priorities. One is a sort of an overarching topic of public engagement. I appreciate it will be weaving through lots of the initiatives, but I think there's spelling that out in an overarching way might be helpful. And then also the relationship on this agenda between the CA and the local authorities. I think there's another important thing.
They're really helpful, Martin. Good points. I don't know if officers want to come back on those or.
So just on the point about the kind of interface with local authorities, I think in scoping and drafting the revised climate plan, that's something that we need to spend some time on to make sure that we do that well and make sure that there's no duplication there, and that the kind of policy landscape at a strategic level and a local level fits together well. So I think that's a helpful point and something that we've kind of got in our sights from a policy perspective. The other points, public engagement and comms, yeah, I think that's fine. We'll take that away and come back with something on that. The flood programme's a great offer, thank you. Yeah, and we'll be in contact about planning for that agenda. And then on the engaging with other committees, I suppose one of the things we've wondered about, and indeed for the private session on the climate plan, we wondered about whether we also invite chairs of other relevant committees to that session. So that's one way that we could potentially get some integration across the conversations. But happy to take other thoughts and ideas either today or outside of the meeting. And then the point about influencing national government, we'll take that one away as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Gideon, what to come back?
Just a quick observation for you. Given that we're meant to be the expert groups and the experts in these fields, can we be very careful when we put images out on documents? Like if you look at page 65, I think it is, the image there of the PV sunken down in the building doesn't add a great deal to the understanding of PV, and it could look like we don't understand it as well as in West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So I just think if we can just be a little bit careful with some of these kinds of images, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Shall we wrap that one up? And then that's just one for us to note, I do believe. So seeing nods around the room for that one. Okay, moving on to item number 9, which is the local growth plan. And I believe that's Joe Barnum who's going to be giving us that report. So over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read the slides that were circulated, so I was just going to give a bit of brief context and background to this and open up for any comments and thoughts on those. So this piece of work has been going on for a while now, first as an economic strategy and now local growth plan. And the recent, so first local and then national elections have really shone a light on this work. So as a mayoral priority set out in the Mayor's Manifesto to publish a local growth plan within 6 months of the election, and now also as national government policy. It is obviously early days in terms of that national policy direction, and there are conversations happening at the moment with politicians and also with civil servants and officers to understand the role of local growth plans and what they mean in terms of further devolution, and single settlement discussions are ongoing. But we do know that they are going to be statutory 10-year documents that will feed into a national industrial strategy. So the pack that's been shared was discussed at the Combined Authority last week, and it sets out our approach to the local growth plan across 4 pillars of action. So there's been a good bit of work that's gone into pulling together that framework. So we've had a really comprehensive piece of evidence done by the R&I team, which really sets out the scale of the challenge that we face in West Yorkshire in terms of our output gap that we have with the national average, and what that means in terms of the number of jobs, business skills and investment that we need to bring into the region to close that gap that we have with the UK average. And what we're trying to bring out in this work is the opportunity of devolution to really address those challenges. Really working at things in a different way, and devolution gives us the opportunity to do that, bringing together different areas in a more holistic approach. We look at issues such as things like childcare and health and wellbeing and the role they play in our economy in boosting productivity, in areas where traditionally haven't necessarily had direct levers, but we know they're really important. And through devolution, we have the opportunity to look at things in a different way and act on those issues. So it's already been touched on, and there's obviously going to be quite a bit of work to align the local growth plan with existing policy and also programme work that's going on. So the climate and environment plan, of course, being a key part of that, and the emissions pathways. So making sure that they are aligned at that strategic level. And I think that's particularly important in terms of the monitoring and the indicators that are developed for the local growth plan. So although it is a growth plan, it's clear and set out in the pack that this is growth that needs to be sustainable, it needs to be inclusive, and it needs to boost health and wellbeing. And we agreed last year the West Yorkshire plan that sets out those principles, and so in terms of that alignment, we are all working towards those vision and missions from the West Yorkshire plan and those joint indicators that underpin them. So that is where we will be able to make sure that we are all strategically aligned across those key documents. We do look at the opportunities for the green economy through this as a real area of strength for West Yorkshire, and looking at our traditional sector strengths and how they can support transition. And it will bring in some of the key strategic programmes that have already been outlined and are going to be discussed at the committee. So Home Energy West Yorkshire programme and all of the opportunities that will arise through there. In terms of next steps, so we are continuing discussions, taking feedback on the approach that's been outlined, and there is obviously a lot more detail to come in this, and that will bring out some of those opportunities more strongly. So we are looking at drafting a more detailed narrative over the next few months, whilst also continuing to engage with the government to understand the implications of their national policy and how this will fit into there. But we are hoping to have something produced by the autumn time. So I will pause there and happy to take any comments or questions on the pack. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Before I do my usual and say something, is there anyone else in the room who wants to pick up things on there? Councillor Anderson.
Just quickly, I was discussing this morning with scrutiny staff. Do you think you'll be able to make the October date now or not? Because the budget isn't until October itself, there will be outcomes of the budget that will affect this. Is October still, this is for me trying to plan my work, is that still feasible, that date, or do you think in your heart of hearts it will actually slip now?
Yeah, I think it's challenging because, as you say, it's quite fluid, and we've had the announcement on the budgets and things. So I think that we will be that there will be something that we want to produce, pulling together the pack that's shared. And you know, we are working on a quite concise summary at the moment that will kind of feed into some of these conversations on the spending review and things. So I think, yeah, we will aim to have something drafted up at that point, but we will, you know, obviously align with what happens nationally as well. And, you know, I think one of the things that we do know is this is going to be a statutory document. So what that means in terms of further consultation that might be required, sort of bearing that in mind as well in terms of timeframes. So I think it's definitely keeping a watching brief on this.
Thanks, Councillor. And Joe, yeah, obviously a lot of moving parts at the moment in terms of things moving quite quickly at national level, and then the recess and the scheduling, so that's appreciated. Jack and then Gideon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, broadly speaking, the previous question has just asked what I was going to ask, but just to say I think we're moving in the right direction with the strategy. I think you've done a good job of catching the unique selling points of each district and trying to merge them into a cohesive whole, which is never easy. Just an incredibly petty point for me, and I do apologise. The sentence about our places, the formatting's cut the last couple of sentences off for Wakefield's sentence, so I'd have to raise that, or I'd... Sorry about that. I think it's page 64 around that, or 84. Yeah.
Very much paying attention, and we love a bit of nitpicking in this committee. Thank you, Jack. And I'm sure Officer put that straight. Gideon.
Yeah, as you, Jack, maybe mentioned the first part of it, I won't go on to the nitpicking part. The local authorities, like, I'm not in the local authority, so what are they actually doing in terms of their own individual parts and that feeding up? Can you maybe expand on that a bit, please?
Yeah, so we've worked really closely with the local authorities in pulling this together. So we've had a group of officers that have sort of worked through the process, and also at that sort of chief exec and leaders level as well. So each local authority does have their own or is developing their own economic strategy, wellbeing framework. And we've used those to feed into this to make sure that's being reflected. I think it is a challenge, sort of, you know, needed to try to make sure we reflect local priorities, but without duplicating what's being said. So trying to get that balance right between the two things. But we're sort of continuing to work closely and engage with the local authorities and make sure that those priorities are reflected. And that, as you see coming through in the pack, where there are distinct things that are happening, and then, you know, there are the regional priorities that, you know, will impact across all areas.
I have a supplementary. It's just a real
quick one. Gideon, we're gone.
just a real quick one. if it isn't, if the regional ones aren't strong enough, or the authority ones aren't strong enough, are you pushing back on those to drive it harder?
Sorry, what do you mean? The strategies?
Yeah,
or the
if the strategies aren't forward thinking enough, or aren't broad enough to actually meet all of our regional requirements, are we then going back to and asking how we can improve it?
Well, and I think that's that's where we come in at that regional level to be able to do that. And so some local priorities will have benefits for that whole region. So it's really important that we reflect those in here, and particularly sort of the role of Leeds in driving growth in West Yorkshire, and how that's reflected as our core city. But I think that is really the role of this, to be able to elevate those local priorities and strengthen them and bring them together into a regional document. So I think that's on us to do that through this local growth plan.
And there's bits to pick out, isn't there? The corridors of opportunity thing clearly leans towards Leeds and Bradford. So I know for Kirk, Leeds, Wakefield and ourselves, we'd like to ultimately see a wider emphasis on what that means. But also there's brilliant stuff in there about the inclusive economy and rural areas, which is something I think we can all talk about and hope that National pick out as well when they come to speak to us. So Jack and then Adam. You've done Jack. Yeah. Adam and then Martin.
Thank you, Scott. Note the mission around sustainability. The pillars of sustainability being reduce, reuse, recycle. I didn't see anything coming out around circular economy in the region. And is there an opportunity to showcase some of that to really as a sales pitch and something that we can do well?
Should we collect these two comments and then you can come back on if that's all right?
I think this is just a presentational issue, but building housing retrofit gets a little mention in skills. It gets half a line in place, and nothing else. Regen's got three slides. Urban Extension's got 2 slides. The other bullets have got nothing on retrofit. Given that that's probably going to be a 15 billion, give or take a few billion, investment to the local economy just on housing, let alone the other buildings, I think it's a significant economic opportunity that shouldn't be underplayed.
Yes, and it's absolutely in there in terms of one of our investment priorities. I think there was a positioning of where we place that within the plan, because it's absolutely key. And yeah, definitely that will come out and it is there. On circular economy, yes, it's definitely a strength that has come through in our analysis in terms of the green economy opportunities. It's something where West Yorkshire is actually seen as having a comparative advantage, and we've got some really good data around that. So that's another one of those things that we need to bring out in the more detail around that circular economy opportunities, because it is something that we can really promote through this as part of our growth plans.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much, Joe. It's really good, and some good stuff in there, and thanks contributions from the floor as well. Okay, moving on, and thank you so much, Sonia and Tawanda, who've come to speak to us about the next item, which is a handy segue because we just touched on it then, which is the skills report. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Chair. I will just do a brief introduction, and then I'll hand over to my colleague from the Schools Partnership team, Tawanda, because at the last committee members were quite interested in our strategic work with schools, and I thought it'd be useful to give a more comprehensive update at this meeting. But in terms of skills and progress since the last time we met, taking forward some of the actions from the Green Jobs Task Force Action Plan, there are 3 main areas of note which are detailed in the report. The first one being adult skills and some new commissioned adult skills training, which is level 3 and above, which is designed and led by employers, and has led to new training provision in the region in that space. The second one is around our employment support activity, so how we help people to progress in work or to find work. Employment West Yorkshire is a local authority-led programme, and there is a wide range of activities there around the green and digital agendas as areas of priorities, and activities that have been undertaken through local authorities who lead that programme. And then the third area, which is probably what we've just touched upon, around further education and working with the sector to create a pilot to support more people to train to enter these industries. The key issue that has come to light there working with the sector is around tutor shortages and the retention of staff within FE. So we're working really closely with the college principals, in particular Nikki Davis from Leeds College of Building is really leading the charge in this area, to design a pilot that helps us retain talents within the sector and utilises the talent within private industry to help create that workforce for the future. We know that to deliver some of the big commitments we've made towards retrofit and towards mass transit, this is exactly the space that we need to be taking action with further details to follow. But on that note, unless there's any specific questions, I'll hand over to Wanda to present on our work in schools.
Thank you. Just trying.
Sorry, I didn't notice that Councillor Dye's hand was up there. Wanted to address some of the points just made.
Sorry, I can wait. It's just Sonia said unless there are any specific questions.
No, you do. Go for it.
Go straight in. Well, just picking up Sonia on the point about future development of skills and tutors. I mean that's going to be absolutely crucial, isn't it, to everything that we're talking about, whether we're looking at EVs or heat pumps. And it's a real worry if there are potentially students out there that could benefit from these courses, and it possibly links to what you're going to talk about the work in schools, and we don't have the tutors to deliver, and I don't know how we do that, but it would be potentially a really rewarding career for people. I don't know how we get to that. Are there any specific plans in place for that?
It's definitely, so we've brought together the FE sector with employers to look at what the range of options could be in this space, and that's what's being developed presently. So that's why we don't have a final option to propose, but it could include things like how do we utilise the expertise within industry to do teachings within the FE sector. The key issue for the sector is pay, because the tutors in colleges don't get paid as much as their school counterparts. And of course, if they're offered work in the industry at a higher level of pay, it's very difficult to retain them. So we're looking at what the art of the possible is and alternative solutions, but that's work currently being undertaken.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Okay. Again, a question that came up at scrutiny on Friday. What is a green job? And how do you measure it? We've got a target. I'm not saying anybody's failed to meet the target, by the way. The question we've got is that going to, will that be part of your task force work stream? Are you going? Is that one of your outputs to find what a green job is, so that we can then ask for it to be monitored exactly, so that a job that looks as though it might be green, but when you scratch away the surface isn't as green as it should be, and ones that maybe someone doesn't think is green is actually contributing quite a bit to the agenda. Have you got any definition yet or not?
So Sonia, can you do the paragraph and not the day-long workshop session answer to that question, please?
Thank you for the question. And the Green Jobs Task Force did define what a green job is, and I feel like I'm under a bit of pressure now to recall the exact definition. I will, I will. But yes, we have defined it.
Perfect. I think Gideon, your hand was up there. Hope you're not going to be pithy now with your comments.
No. I'm not going to even go there. I was really going to ask about the SME sector and the particular smaller end of it, and how we're looking to support that side of it in terms of the skills, and how can we integrate them into it better.
Great question, thank you. We are developing a Skills for Growth service, which is specifically to support SMEs to be better connected with the skills offer. So that is something we're actively looking at. Any advice that you have in that space of how to do it better would be gratefully received. We are talking to businesses, people who are part of our networks, such as the Inclusive Growth Network, the business representative organisations. But the challenge is always to get that wide, inclusive view.
Okay, thank you. I think that's everyone on that bit. Tawanda, over to you to complete it.
Thank you. Just trying to ensure that my slides are up on the So afternoon everyone, my name is Tawanda and I'm what you call an enterprise coordinator in the schools partnership team. What we do is we support schools and colleges across West Yorkshire with their careers provision, ensuring that they are given as much support as they can to their young people and helping them make the informed decisions for their next steps, but also taking into consideration the sort of local economic structure and how that might have an impact on them. So today, once I've got some slides going, I wanted to tell you guys about some of the work that we've been doing in the schools partnership team over the last couple of years, as well as some projects that are upcoming, predominantly around green skills and green jobs, affecting people from across the region from all different age groups. Bear with me a moment.
Sorry, I can't get it to connect.
I mean, it might be okay because we have got some of this, so I don't know if you want to. How should we manage it?
I think can you talk to them without presenting the slides, if that's all right?
That's all good with me. Oh, there we go.
Here goes, if by magic.
So as I mentioned, we've started a few projects over the years looking at green skills and how can we better support young people. And the first thing I wanted to mention was our Green Skills Youth Programme that ran in 2022. It was a project spanning across all of West Yorkshire, targeting young people aged 4 to 17 years old, which had a reach of 174 young people. The general objective with that was looking at how can we help young people understand what a green job is, so asking that question we just had before, as well as identifying any particular barriers to helping young people access the green economy. And we did this through a number of activities, which included things like Q&A sessions around what is actually a green role, young people given some pretend funding to take a look at what is important to them and how would they invest when it comes to green areas. And alongside that, you also had the youth consultation panel, which then heavily fed into the Green Skills Task Force and the recommendations that came out of that piece of work, which was predominantly around how young people actually have an interest in green skills, and the more that they know about it, the more they want to engage with it. In terms of outcomes, what we found before as well as after, the students were given a questionnaire to complete, and there was an 82% increase in students saying they'd be interested in a green job following on from the activities. Students rating their understanding as excellent increased by 10 times, and there was also acknowledgement that there is a lack of knowledge around the green economy. And going back to that investment activity, some of the things that young people mentioned was key to them and the most important things to invest in this particular order were green living, green facilities, low carbon, and green voices. Those were their priority areas in terms of what is the most important thing to them after they've had extensive sort of training, so to speak, around what is green jobs and how it affects them. Moving on from that, in 2023, we launched a grant opportunity open to 183 secondary schools and colleges all across West Yorkshire, with 10 schools being awarded grant funding to take on a project around green jobs and green skills. Each project would be unique in terms of their approach and how they engage young people. And we also opened this up to not just cover the sort of typical barriers in terms of disadvantaged groups. I think for a lot of the work that we do, it's looking at sort of economical disadvantage. But when you take a look at how schools were impacted by the pandemic and everything else, you have a lot of issues that are coming up in schools. For example, a lot of non-attenders due to things like anxiety, etc. So for this particular grant, we decided to almost open it up to say, let us know who your challenging cohort is and what approach of ways are you going to take to engage them in the green economy. Projects are currently taking place. They started from September 2023 and will finish in October 2024. And As of February 2024, we pulled up some figures from the impact and the reach, and by that time there were 2,498 direct beneficiaries. That means that the students that the schools expressed that they'll be targeting in their initial application, so again going back to whether it's economical factors or other sort of disadvantaging factors, and on top of that you also had 5,005 indirect beneficiaries. So those are the students that, although they weren't targeted in the initial application, they just so happened to also be beneficiaries of the project. And you also had 357 key influencers. Now those are your teachers, your parents, and everyone else associated with that. In terms of the sort of final results, we are in the process of collating endpoint forms from each of the grant recipients, and we'll be able to get more information on the impact as well as reach and any other sort of outcomes from each individual projects as of October 2024. In terms of looking ahead, we are looking to start off a project called Green Innovators. And this is specifically targeting primary school children from high deprivation postcodes all across West Yorkshire. The idea with this is to target and engage 3,000 primary school children as well as their parents and increase their understanding of green skills. We're also looking to challenge stereotypes around who can pursue a green career, but also what is it. As well as that, we're also looking to engage with those educators, providing them with resources and knowledge on how they can embed green careers into the curriculum. In terms of this project, it will be starting in September. It will be a 6-week programme for each individual school, with the first cohort going between September and December. And with this project, the students will have an eco-innovation project, which again will have resources attached to it, as well as industry professionals going in to discuss their own careers journey, what enticed them to go into a green career, whether it was purposeful or accidental, but either way, celebrating the case regardless. The main cohort will be Year 5 students, but there will be other touch points for different year groups to make sure that the project has as wide a reach as possible. And to kind of celebrate the kickoff, I thought I'd bring you guys a nice picture to show you how it's all looking. So that's some of the work that we've been doing in terms of the bigger projects, but as a schools partnership team, we're always looking for sort of opportunities, like I know those retrofit that was just mentioned. That's something that we'll be looking to kind of take on and sort of see how can we help young people understand what retrofit is, what impact it's going to have on them, as well as the wider economy. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that both. Some really good stuff there, and finished on a high. Just a bit of good news from what we've done back at the ranch in terms of taking that forward is some of the recommendations from the action plan is very much informing our post-16 strategy, and we aim to do quite a lot of boot camp stuff over the next few years, and hopefully with a bit of sustainability keep that work going. But anyone want to pick up any of the Councillor Ferriby?
Yeah, I just wondered if you monitored some of the older age children that you initially worked with, have they actually gone into green jobs and training? And also how you keep up the momentum, because this is a really big area that we are, if we're not careful, going to have a skills gap, because we've got it across a number of industries, not only in West Yorkshire but the length and breadth of the country. And then also you touched upon about it's retaining those people, and actually sometimes it's a case of that, you know, people have families and you have to follow the money when you're bringing up a family, but it's how we can work with the industry to ensure that locally grown young people and older adults that go into the green industry, actually we retain them to carry out the work that's much needed in this area.
Question, yeah. Over to you guys.
So in terms of how we can keep up the momentum, so going back to the second project that we did, the grant funding, one of the requirements for each of the applicants was the sustainability aspect. So how will you keep your project sustainable beyond just this year, as well as the time for the funding? And each project, that was one of the biggest scoring criterias. So we fully expect it to be sustainable across all those 10 schools. In terms of sort of keeping that local talent, so to speak, you know, with pretty much all these different activities, we ensure that we try as much as possible to include local businesses as well as alumni where possible, just to show that there are those opportunities in West Yorkshire and you don't need to go beyond that. Yeah, I think, apologies if I've missed anything, but if I have, please do remind me.
Yeah, it was just how many of the older end that you initially worked with, so that maybe the 15 to 17-year-olds, have many of them gone into green jobs and training?
So in terms of monitoring that, I'd say it's a little early at this stage to take a look at sort of progression opportunities. One of the things I think we should and will be working on from the new year is looking at tracking those previous projects to see, in terms of maybe not so much employment, but in terms of their next steps, was it in any relation to a green skill?
Okay, thanks for that, Martin.
Yeah, similar vein to Sarah's question on sustainability. It's kind of a question about scalability. Sounds like the projects have been really successful. I'm guessing there's been some really good lessons learned about what works and what doesn't work. 10 schools on the second project, great, but there's hundreds of schools across West Yorkshire. So how's this going to be? Is there a plan to make it scalable?
So as part of the West Yorkshire Careers Hub, which is what we look after, what we try and do is share best practice as much as possible. We have 183 schools across the region, and for that particular second project, we have just commissioned some in-depth case studies to take a look at, from each individual project, what were the big successes, what were some challenges, you know, what worked, and that's something that we'll be looking to share with the wider hub, and then from there looking at how can us as enterprise coordinators with our individual caseloads support them with that kind of scalability, and to kind of ensure that we try and do that as much as possible. We've got what we call a budding scheme, where we look to match up schools and colleges from one side where they may want to take something on, or if they're struggling with a particular area, we can refer them on to a school or college where we provide that sort of thing like cover funding, etc., to try and remove barriers as much as possible. So we can take a lot of the almost kind of things where you don't need the grant funding to spread that across. And even in some of the projects, like one at Brighouse High School, for example, part of their project was developing resources that can be shared with members across the hub. So again, when you're going back to scalability, that will be a resource that's sitting there and available for anyone to access.
Okay, Gideon?
Just going back to the SME side of it, and how, like, the SMEs and the ones I know typically don't have the resource to take on young people because they say it takes up too much time, whether it's apprenticeship or anything else. So how are we looking at integrating that side of it in so they can take them on, take these students on?
So as part of, again, going back to the Careers Hub, we work quite closely with businesses, having an almost brokerage service between the world of work and the world of education. And in that, we do have quite a number of SMEs where we work with them to sort of see how can they better engage with education. So we have these enterprise advisors that will typically work with the school on a strategic basis to take a look at what are the needs of industry and how can schools better prepare their students to progress into that. Now, of course, there's always the sort of time aspect with an SME where they can't afford to pretty much send someone on a sort of longer term basis. but we do try as much as possible to understand what the needs from an SME perspective and how can we better support that, as well as working internally with colleagues from teams like the Skills for Business to engage with those SMEs to try and support them with things like talent pipeline and
I'll just add to that as well. Across the wider work of the team, we're doing two quite big pieces of work. One is around looking at technical pathways for progression of young people within our key sectors, and we'll be hosting a roundtable in the autumn with employers to really understand what the barriers are to offering those kinds of, we hear this time and time again, that, you know, there's different barriers for different employers for different types of work experience provision. So as part of that mapping work, we want to have that roundtable discussion. The other thing that we're doing is around a graduate pilot, a mayor's graduate pilot, to support SMEs, help retain graduate talent within the region, and that will be launched in the autumn term as well. So there's just two examples of what we're doing.
Okay, all right, well, thanks both for that report. Really good and interesting to see your progress. I think we've probably got a role as members as well to amplify, promote and engage some of the work that's being done, you know, by the mayor and by you guys in our own locales to make sure we maximise that ambition. So thank you very much both. Okay, moving on to the next item, and the biggest news since Marathon became Snickers, massive rebranding operation here from the artist formerly known as the Home Energy West Yorkshire. So is it up to you, Sophie, to present this item?
Thank you. So yeah, as Chair has noted, we are now Home Energy West Yorkshire rather than Better Homes Hub, and that follows some audience testing that was completed. So the new programme was launched on the 22nd of July along with two new offers of support. The first being a low interest retrofit loan, which you will have seen before at this committee. I can give you an update on that so far. So following formal launch on the 22nd of July, there have so far been 17 applications, at least one per district, with the most being in Leeds, where we've had 8 so far. Those are all progressing through assessment at the moment, and we've had a mix of measures being applied for at the minute, so 5 heat pumps, 5 solar, and then a few other bits and bobs as well. The second offer of support that was launched on the 22nd of July was the Solar Collective Buying Scheme. So that actually opened to applications a little earlier, from the 5th of July. There have been over 3,000 expressions of interest so far. And the window for expressions of interest closes on the 9th of August. We then expect the market to return an offer to those the residents that have expressed an interest, and they will have 4 weeks to decide whether they want to then take up that offer. So we expect installations to then take place between September and March. And finally, a short update, I guess, from the paper is you'll see in there that we've also requested that the committee approves transfer of delegations to our new head of Home Energy West Yorkshire from previous head of service. That's at section 4 in your paper. Thank you.
Brilliant, Sophie. Thanks so much for that. Any comments from the floor? Katie.
Hi, thank you. I've had a number of people raise with me concerns about the ethics of the chain of supplying of solar panels, and it's not something I know much about at all, but going all the way back down to the materials, to the production methods, when that's sourced in places around the world that have ethical standards issues. Is that something that's been explored, and am I able to offer reassurance to the people who've asked me questions about it?
Right off the bat there with the chunky stuff, so over to you, Sophie.
Yeah, straight in. So yes, that has been explored. It's something that we are aware of. We are aware that there are some risks around modern slavery, and that is something that we take into account in our projects as we progress through them. So it's a risk that we are aware of, yes.
Hopefully something we'll track and sort of keep coming back to in terms of monitoring that work, but thank you. John, I think your hand was up next, was it? No, it wasn't. I'm very bad at this chairing, like, so Gideon, I'm going to go with you and then look for hands.
So, just on the basis of what's just been said, then, do we have a sustainability strategy for procurement here, and how does that relate to what's just been covered?
So it's a risk that's on our risk registers for our programme as a whole, and we're working with our commercial team at the moment to make sure that any procurement that takes place is in line with our modern slavery statement as an organisation, but also, as you say, sustainability requirements too.
And I'm guessing sort of moving picture stuff is some of the stuff happening nationally around GB Energy, and some of the changes and procurement issues are going to be something we track and think about how that applies to us going forward as well. Anyone else? No? Okay, well, thank you for the report. I think we're being asked to note this and then approve the existing delegations outlined in the report, and for those to be transferred to the newly appointed Head of Service for Home Energy West Yorkshire. So we can just see a tacit nod. Yeah, okay. Perfect, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to Rosanna, it's your show in terms of transport decarbonisation. You're very welcome.
Thanks very much. So this is a paper on the local transport plan and its relationship to decarbonisation. So we had a paper at the last committee back in May on what the local transport plan was trying to do. So the purpose of this paper is basically twofold. One is to highlight the local transport plan engagement, which is now live, a public and stakeholder engagement on the draft plan, and on Mass Transit Phase 1 was launched on the 15th of July. And the purpose of this engagement is to receive feedback on the proposed vision, objectives and principles that will guide the policies and associated interventions that will be included in the new local transport plan. The other purpose of this paper is to look at specifically at the decarbonisation elements of the local transport plan. So this is a document that's still in development. What comes out of the engagement exercise will help to shape our thinking in this area. But where we are with it currently is tackling the climate emergency is one of the 4 objectives of the draft plan, which is currently out to engagement. Combined Authority officers are working with district partners to explore a number of different policy areas that could help us achieve this goal through the draft plan. And the paper sets out 4 key areas where we're looking to do that. One is around sustainable travel, so embedding and promoting sustainable travel choice, which will be key to making public transport, walking, cycling, wheeling easier. And a big part of this requires a consideration of how we're going to use our streets. We need to make sure we're balancing the needs of different transport options in different places in our streets. So this examination could include things such as street space use, travel demand, how the customer offer can be improved in the future on public transport, and including a focus on the public transport network integration and affordability. Alongside this, we need to look at decarbonisation of the network. So the transition away from petrol and diesel to solutions such as electric vehicles, hydrogen and other low and zero emission fuels will be a major contribution to climate ambitions as well as air quality ambitions. And through the local transport plan policy framework, we're exploring options for decarbonisation, drawing on other pieces of work that are going on and have already been completed, including the rail strategy, the draft electric vehicle infrastructure strategy, which is also out to consultation at this moment, as well as bus reform work and hydrogen work. Another aspect would be digital connectivity, so boosting productivity and enabling inclusive growth are also draft objectives of the emerging local transport plan, and improving digital connectivity in the region will not only help us with both these objectives, but also help to reduce carbon emissions and reducing the need to travel. And the 4th area is climate resilience and biodiversity. So exploring climate adaptation and resilience and identifying the risk and opportunities for the region from the changing climate is needed through our transport infrastructure. And likewise, we need to consider how the local transport plan can help us to achieve our ambitions around nature restoration, biodiversity and wildlife habitats in the region. So in these kind of key areas, policies are being explored and will be updated and to reflect the outcomes of the engagement exercise that's going on at this moment in time. And also this work's being done in parallel with our carbon emissions reduction pathway work and the refreshed climate environment plan. So then I'll leave it there, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rosanna. I'm getting Adam and then Jack to start with. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just in the section where you were talking about sustainable travel, note the use of street space, and it's just to put a plea in there for the consideration of flood risk management, so sustainable drainage. You'd gone on to talk about biodiversity, so you might be heading in that point anyway, but yeah, happy to pick up with you separately and share some of the work that Yorkshire Water have done with other local authorities and combined authorities.
I think you're right, and BNG and the whole SUDS agenda is like probably an opportunity to kill, I don't want to say kill two birds with one stone, but make sure that we make two similar agendas happen at the same time. Just looking at Project Ash Green in my own borough that's doing a really interesting school streets project specifically with SUDS at its core, so I'd like to see more of that working out. Rosanna, anything to pick out on that?
No, that's definitely something we'd be interested in, so I've made a note of that. Thank you.
Okay, Jack.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Rosanna. I very much welcome the direction and content of the report. I think one thing for me, though, I wonder if it'd be possible to have more of, to draw out more explicitly public health and air quality benefits from the report. Obviously, in terms of most of those interventions are going to improve air quality, if not all. Particularly, I'm thinking of an example in Wakefield City Centre, not to be too parochial, but one of our air quality zones effectively is majority of emissions there are caused by buses. And obviously when we get the zero emission buses online, that will deal with that problem to a large extent. But I just think if we're clear about the core benefits, that might help us to tie in with public health and other strategies that public authorities across the public sector are trying to achieve with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely would be keen to do that. And we're also looking at air quality in a separate strand of work, but hoping to draw them all together. And that kind of public health angle is really important as well.
I think there's a bit of a reality check, isn't there, about the actual, the gravity of what we need to do in terms of transport and thinking around road reallocation and some of the changes that we need to make. I wonder if councillors, I'm sure you do all probably grasp the understanding of some of the unpopular decisions that we're going to have to take, but that are critically necessary. But actually those unpopular decisions often track into quite good results politically, to be slightly mercenary about it. I think as well we need to probably be cognizant of the fact that great to do capital projects, but we need to be mindful of the revenue implications, not to just deliver, but to do some of the back end stuff, whether that's maintenance, whether that's the development of the plans, and that's something that's really live in, I think, all authorities as we look towards our budget setting, which I'm sure leaders and people are currently doing. So I guess I think the LTP is the opportunity to highlight all this, and hopefully officers are painting that picture around what the implications are at the same time as well. Gideon?
Yeah, can I maybe just pick up on one, and it comes off what Scott said actually. That we've had in Kirklees a project scrapped in the end, or postponed, or whatever we want to call it, but specifically the main problem was the existing trees that were there, the mature trees, and how that was dealt with. And there was a big lobby against trees being cut down, obviously, and all of that. And I think there's a piece of work to be done with the activists and also with the BNG side of it to actually get a better understanding of what needs to happen and how it can happen in an appropriate way, because I know that that's just going to keep on coming up, and it's a difficult one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about balancing the priorities, isn't it, and how we manage that effectively. So I'll definitely take that away and something we'll continue to look at.
I think we all want to see lovely LTM 120 compliant stuff in all our boroughs, but I think we all need to be mindful that that's not necessarily always the best solution. And looking in some places like Taff Embankment in Wales and some of the stuff they're doing around slowing traffic and narrowing highways to make sure that spaces are useful for all are good things. And we know there's a lot of good practice out there. So, yeah. Okay, any other points on that? No? Thank you, Rosanna, that's great. We'll take some of those points away and we'll see that evolve as going forward. Okay, I think that's it, and we just need to note the contents of the report. The next one is the West Yorkshire Strategic Climate and Environment Partnership, and this is Femi to deliver this one, please. Over to you.
Thank you. The aim of the paper is to provide the committee with the overview of the partnership, and we are also looking to seek members' input on the aims and objectives of the partnership, its area of focus, and also the interface between the committee and partnership. So I'll just whittle through the slides if that's okay. So obviously, just to give an overview of the partnership, we recognize the need to engage with private partners and private sector organizations. So in March, we published a prior notice information, and we had a couple of applications and expression of interest from private sector organization. Of all the organizations that applied for that, we selected 4 organizations down to the fact that their expression of interest closely aligns with our objectives, as well as the organization they all had the capacity and the expertise to support us with delivering our net zero objectives at the scale and pace that we wanted to go through. At the moment, we are working on finalizing a memorandum of understanding with all the partners, and we just want to seek members' views on the area of focus of the partnership, the governance arrangement, particularly how the committee interface with that partnership, and also the key objectives. So I think the 3 key slides are slides can be found in page 154, 158, and 159. So 154 outlines the area of focus we've identified at the moment. That's majorly taken from our climate and environment plan, and it centers on 5 major area of focus. The first one being energy generation. So that would basically include things around solar. It would include things around wind, battery, green hydrogen as well as the infrastructure required for the delivery of such of that within West Yorkshire. We also think the partnership should be looking into heat pumps and heat networks as well, as long as the associated infrastructure required for their utilization within West Yorkshire as well. Then obviously a key one for us as well is energy efficiency, so retrofit of buildings, both domestic and non-domestic across West Yorkshire. Then the 4th one that we've considered in there is also nature recovery solutions, and this is linking with things like peatland restoration and biodiversity, linking with health and well-being, and also tree planting as well. And finally, we, as an area of focus, we are considering green finance as well, and that's just basically including the development of blended finance solutions that would be very, very useful in delivering our interventions at the scale we want them to go. The 4 partners that has been selected are Centrica, Dakin, Scottish and Southern Energy, and Sustainable Building Services. Some details on those 4 organizations can be found on page 156, if I'm right, or 157. But the other thing we wanted a view on as well, based on those area of focus that's been identified, was the emerging objectives to come out of that. Once again, we've brought that down to about 5 objectives. The first one is with regards to project development activities, feasibility studies on potential large-scale climate and environment schemes and deployment. Then obviously a key one for us was to identify finance and investment models. Another one was procurement mechanisms and exploring how we can enable the infrastructure required for the schemes that have been developed. Then also, if we can design, build and manage climate and environment schemes across West Yorkshire, and also green finance as well. It's important to note that these objectives, obviously, based on your steering, can be refined. It's not agreed yet with the partners, so we are happy to take your views on that. So the final thing we wanted from the committee was to understand, obviously, we want the committee to almost steer the partnership. And so what we are proposing after the signing of the memorandum of understanding by the partners is first, having the MOU, which would highlight the area of focus that we would agree upon, the aims and objectives, but also it will help us with regards to priority setting, at least for the first 1 year. So we will be going into discussions, individual discussions with all 4 partners following the signing of the MOU, and it's just to discuss the priorities for the next 1 year. And we would want to be able to bring that back to committee at a later date just to discuss those priority settings. Then the final thing obviously is performance and monitoring. So it is proposed that performance and progress against the activity of the partnership for the current financial year is reported to future committee meetings, and that basically will help in assessing the performance and the usefulness of the partnership. So I think that's basically everything for myself. I think the key discussion points were first on the area of focus, as outlined on page 154, just to see if the area of focus we've identified are if they're substantial, if there's any other thing we should be adding in there, if there's something you think we should remove out of that. And then also page 158, the emerging objectives based on those area of focus. Are there other things you would want us to add into that, or are there things you would want us to remove from those emerging objectives? And with regards to the interface as well, if that's something we all agree with, or if there's additional mechanisms we want in place as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And having chaired a meeting with them all, I'm pleasantly surprised about their, focus and willingness to engage with this system and the mayoralty and really do that work. And hopefully the whittling down of them to these initial 4 was quite a robust process, but also they're very open to working with and developing other private sector partners to, feed in some of this work. But before I say what I want to say, just a few things. Is there anyone else in the room who wants to pick out? Jacqueline, Gideon first, and then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for all the work and the information in the report. I think clearly this is one of the key ways for public sector to get more capacity in the system and get that expertise that we simply don't have to deliver on some of these things. Very much welcome the suggestion of adding green finance to the mix. I think it needs to be in there. Just one comment in relation to page 156. Obviously, we've not had any company come forward with particular specialism in nature recovery biodiversity. Is that because of just a lack of interest and capacity in the market in the region, in the country? And I suppose what's the contingency if no partner emerges in that area to work with us on that? How will we ensure that we're delivering some of our key schemes in that particular area? So I don't know if that's maybe for Liz or to take away as well.
I think that's something for us to take away. We do identify that the area of focus can change, and obviously we have our local, the team working on that within the combined authority, working on the strategy for that as well, and that's something we would basically take back to the partnership. And once again, the partnership is not fixed. We basically will be seeking for additional partners that could meet those requirements if they're interested in that as well.
Thanks, yeah, exactly as Femi has said, and to add, I think as we develop the local nature recovery strategy, I think that will also highlight some of the real opportunities that are here and probably set out our stall. I think what's also interesting is how some of the conversations that we're starting to have with kind of institutional investors are kind of quite interested in how they can start to invest in these types of schemes, but as yet it's the ability to kind of pay back is quite interesting. So I think there is certainly a lot of interest in this area. So I would see it as a more emerging that we would want to think about what partnerships would be right through that. I think as already mentioned, there was a number of obviously others who we didn't sift through, and it was a robust process that the team took to whittle down to the 4. We are really interested though in keeping that wider network. So I think I've written back to those people who weren't successful to say, but are you still willing to be part of a wider partnership? And we'll try and develop what that looks like. So because we really recognise that we need a lot of champions in this space, and if anybody's shown interest in working with us, then we want to try and maximise that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right, and we're not going to do this on our own, so we really need to maximise those partnerships for what we can do. So Gideon and Adam first.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a couple of thoughts. One is that transport isn't in here, and transport's a big part of what we're talking about in terms of decarbonisation. But also, this feels, and I appreciate why it's being done this way, but I go back to my remembering Carbon Trust when they started setting up partnerships a long time ago, and this feels like a process where big companies can benefit from it without the smaller organisations having a chance. So what we've got is the Centricas, we've got Dakins and people like that in here. How do we engage the SME side of it into this marketplace as well? Because at the moment, those organisations will want to do it with their way of doing it, with their people. They might bring on more staff to do this, but invariably the smaller SMEs will feel isolated by this and feel like the combined authority is siding with bigger organisations. I know certainly when I saw that the partnership was coming up, I looked at it and thought, well, you know, forget anything from any of the people I know. So I was just wondering how we're going to maybe deal with that.
Thanks, Gideon. I'll bring in Liz on that.
Thanks, and Femi might also want to come out. I think it's a really good point. It certainly wasn't about trying to isolate organisations. I think what we've recognised is that some of the larger organisations have their own funding that they are wanting to put into places, and we are trying to maximise the amount they put here, and hopefully also work with them in a way which is to our objectives. So this is not about trying to identify organisations that we might run through procurements through or kind of engage with through the processes. This was recognising that some of these big organisations do have a lot of money to spend, and how can we kind of do that in a partnership approach? That's not to say that there aren't smaller organisations that also have that. So this wasn't set up to try and isolate or do as you suggest, but if that's the feeling, then we probably need to say something around how this is going to work more broadly then, and we can kind of address that, because I definitely don't want that to be the feeling in our marketplace.
I'll bring you back in a moment, but Jack's got his hand up first, just to think.
Actually, just on that exact point, I just wonder, in terms of providing a bit of comfort to Gideon and reassurance on that for the committee as well, is there anything in the MOU or frameworks about using local providers that we could ask the partners to commit to, even if it's just a broad commitment that they will look to use local providers and local businesses in the first instance to source the workforce and some of the materials, etc.
Thanks, and we can look at what we say in the MOU about the local partnerships. I think, to be really, really clear, there's no money exchanging hands through this partnership. So it's, if there is to be any further procurement from us or from local authorities, we would go through the relevant processes, and certainly social value and the relationship between the supply chain and the local market is definitely part of that. But we're kind of quite a number of steps before that in terms of this partnership, and we've tried to be really clear that we're not commissioning people to do the work that's maybe kind of suggested through this.
Briefly come back, Gideon, we've got a few hands up.
Yeah, no, it's a perception issue for one, and also there's a benefit issue. So whether money's being changed hands or not, there's a benefit issue, and I know from previous that this has been quite a difficult one. So just raising it. Thank you.
No, that's good, thank you. And maybe there's an opportunity while we're scheduling the offline meetings to do something where we come together and think about some of that synergy, influencing shared goals as well, and invite maybe a named rep or two from each of the organisations to think about what the shape of that is, just to provide a bit of comfort and also have a bit of strategy going on as well. So literally going to be 1, 2, 3, Adam, Martin and Jenny, all sat next to each other.
Hopefully a really quick one. In terms of the sort of expressions of interest, was it just the private sector, or did you talk to charity sectors, so people like the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust? Just noting Jack's question about where's the capability coming from for nature recovery? It might not be in the private sector, it might be in the charity sector.
Caulfield Regeneration Trust, Groundwork, all sorts of organisations like that.
Okay, so they're a combined sort of question. Femi, do you want to come in on that first?
Yes, on the on the public information notice that we put out, it was majorly for private organization, and we received, I think, 18 to 19 expression of interest from different sort of organizations, consultancy and different types of organizations, and we did review all of that. But once again, as I alluded to earlier, this is not fixed in stone yet, and we are basically, this is something that will be reviewed from time to time, and all the partners are aware of that. And just to also mention on what Lisa said earlier, particularly for smaller organizations, we do have the stakeholder informed forum that would form out as part of this, where the 4 partners will meet with other stakeholders within the region, and that's something that we are trying to think about the governance for that as of now. And the basic idea for that is for those 4 partners to meet with other stakeholders within the region. We already have conversations with some organizations who would have loved to be part of the partnership, but just couldn't be part of it as of yet, just due to the process. And we are basically putting them as part of that informed stakeholder forum, and it's just basically to have more governance to ensure no one has that perception of being ostracized as part of this.
Okay, Martin, is that?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I wonder if maybe the partners might want to share some of their local successes and stuff to help shape some of the work that we want to do, and Tracy's work as well, because clearly it's not going to be their first rodeo working locally, but hopefully an opportunity to do that really well and strongly in West Yorkshire. Jenny?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted, it just felt appropriate to flag the work that Leeds are doing in the green financing, along with it's called the Air Resilience Company, and it supports a lot of the NFM solutions and soil aeration that have gone in place for Leeds Fast 2. So there's some really pioneering, really sort of excellent thinking that has gone into that, contacting both large and small local firms in terms of how they can support the financing of some of these initiatives that we obviously, want to continue and grow in. So yeah, just felt good opportunity just to flag that work, some good learning. So Jonathan Moxon is the key contact FCRM officer from Leeds. He loves talking about this scheme. It's amazing. He will love the opportunity to tell you more about that. But yeah, some good work happening. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Eminent.
Yeah, that's right, and yes.
It's not written yet.
Yes, it's not fully complete, but you're quite right. Yeah. Anyone else? No. Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. That's really helpful. Hopefully, we've picked out some of the points and sort of questions there that need answering, and we look forward to keeping aligned, I guess, with those partners and hopeful opportunities around us coming together and in terms of understanding what can and can't be done. Okay. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I think we've done that. So number 14 is the date of the next meeting, which I understand is due to be held on Tuesday, 26th of November, 2024. So thank you all for your time contributions, which have been robust and pleasant. So much appreciated, and see you next time. Thank you.